At my 65th birthday dinner in a modest restaurant outside Phoenix, my daughter stood up, tapped her glass, and announced to everyone in the room that I had become a financial weight the family could no longer carry. My son nodded along without hesitation, my wife smiled politely, and I sat there as the guest of honor while dozens of strangers watched my own family strip me of whatever value I thought I still had. That was 6 months ago. Tonight they are all sitting across from me in my attorney's office asking me to reconsider everything. Let me go back to how this really started. I spent 37 years working as a diesel mechanic in a small industrial part of Mesa, Arizona. I started as an apprentice at 19, learned the trade the hard way, and by my early 30s I owned a small 3-bay repair shop. Nothing fancy, just honest work, oil changes, brake jobs, engine rebuilds when needed, the kind of place where people came back because they trusted the man, not the logo on the sign. My wife Linda was never impressed by any of it. She grew up in Scottsdale, private schools, country clubs, parents who expected their daughter to marry someone with a title. When she married a mechanic her family was polite but clearly disappointed. For years she looked at me like I was a temporary phase she expected to outgrow, like one day I would suddenly turn into a man in tailored suits instead of coveralls stained with grease. We had 2 children. Emily came first, then 3 years later Jason. I loved them more than anything. I changed diapers with hands that smelled like motor oil, built them a backyard swing set myself, taught Jason how to change a tire before he could drive, never missed one of Emily's soccer matches, even the ones hours away in small desert towns. But slowly Linda's quiet dissatisfaction seeped into them, not through words at first, but through tone, through raised eyebrows, through what she praised and what she ignored. Emily went to college in California, studied marketing, landed a job at a tech firm in San Jose, started making good money fast, bought a sleek apartment downtown. Suddenly she was always busy, too busy for Sunday dinners, too busy to stop by the shop. When she did she checked her phone, complained about the heat, and left quickly. Jason went another direction, business degree, then real estate during the housing surge. He made money fast and loud, new car, expensive watches, stopped asking me for advice around the same time. Once he brought a client by the shop and introduced me as the guy who could fix things cheap, not his father, just the guy. Linda retired early from her office job and said she wanted to focus on herself. That meant yoga studios, spa days, lunches with friends whose husbands were doctors and attorneys, and little comments started appearing at dinner, subtle ones, comparisons, observations about other people's vacations, other people's homes, other people's lifestyles, never directly accusing me, but always reminding me where I supposedly fell short. What none of them knew was that for more than a decade I had been quietly building something of my own. It started during the last recession when an older customer taught me about long-term investing, about patience, about buying what others overlooked. I lived the same life, drove the same old truck, packed the same lunches, worked the same hours, while slowly building something solid underneath it all. And I kept it quiet on purpose, because I wanted to know something important before I shared it. I wanted to know whether my family loved the man I was, or only the version of me they wished I had been. They wanted a destination wedding in Mexico and asked us to cover flights and accommodations for Linda's side of the family, another $15,000. I paid that too. After Jason's wedding something shifted. The kids started echoing Linda's comments. Dad, when are you going to retire? You are 62, don't you want to enjoy life? You should sell the shop, that building has to be worth something, you could travel, slow down a little. And that was when it finally clicked. They were not worried about my health or my happiness, they were worried I might spend my money before they could inherit it. They believed the shop and the house were all I had, maybe $700,000 total if they were lucky, and they wanted access to it. The pressure grew. Linda started showing me listings for retirement communities in northern Arizona, quiet places with golf carts and shared walls. Wouldn't it be nice to simplify, she said, sell everything and move somewhere peaceful. Emily hinted that she and her husband were trying to upgrade their condo but prices were tough. If only we had help with a down payment. Jason talked about starting his own real estate firm but needing startup capital. Dad, you could be an investor partner with me. I smiled, nodded, said I would think about it. Then came my 65th birthday. Linda insisted on a big dinner. You are officially a senior now, she said, we should celebrate. She booked a private room at an upscale restaurant downtown, invited extended family, friends, co-workers, even people I barely remembered, around 40 people total. I should have known something was off when Linda kept checking her phone during appetizers and Emily and Jason kept exchanging looks across the table. Halfway through the main course, Emily stood up and tapped her glass with a fork. "Everyone, I would like to say a few words about my dad." The room went quiet. I smiled, thinking this was the toast, the speech you give your father on his birthday. My father has worked incredibly hard his whole life, 37 years as a mechanic. That is dedication, that is sacrifice. Heads nodded, smiles all around. Then she shifted. "But honestly, Dad, you have done enough, you have worked long enough, and frankly it has become a burden on all of us." My smile froze. "Jason and I have talked about this with Mom extensively," she continued. "We think it is time for you to retire, sell the shop, sell the house, move somewhere more manageable. Stop being stubborn about money, stop pretending you need to keep working when you are clearly clinging to the past." She paused and looked around the room. "The truth is, Dad, you have become a financial burden. Your health is not great, you can barely keep up with the shop, and we cannot keep subsidizing your lifestyle while you refuse to make smart decisions." The room was silent. I looked at Linda. She was nodding slightly, wearing that familiar expression that said, "This is for your own good." I looked at Jason. He lifted his glass and said, "Dad, we love you, but it is time to be realistic. Let us help you transition." 40 people stared at me, some uncomfortable, some curious. Linda's friends looked almost satisfied, like they had expected this moment. I set my fork down slowly, took a sip of water, looked at my daughter, my son, my wife, and then I started laughing. Not a polite laugh, but a deep, genuine laugh that came from somewhere in my chest. Emily's face flushed red. "Dad, this is not funny, we are trying to help you." I stood up, every eye in the room fixed on me. "You want to talk about financial burdens, realism, smart decisions?" I pulled out my phone, opened my banking app, and turned the screen toward Emily. "This is my checking account," I said. "I keep about 5,000 here for daily expenses." I swiped. "This is my savings account, 20,000 emergency fund." I swiped again. "This is my investment account, mostly index funds, current value 1.2 million. Emily's mouth fell open. Jason's eyes widened. I was not finished. "And this," I said, opening another app, "is my property management account. I own 7 rental properties across the metro area, total market value about 4.3 million, equity just under 4 million. Linda's face had gone completely white. "And finally I opened one last document. This is the title to the building where my shop operates. I have owned it outright since 2016, current assessed value 1.6 million. I looked around the room. You could hear breathing. "So let us do the math. Investments, property, shop, building, other accounts, total net worth around 6.7 million. I turned back to Emily and said calmly, "Now you said I am a financial burden. I would really like to understand what you meant by that. The wedding I paid for, the credit card debt your mother quietly ran up and that I have been paying off for the last 5 years without a word, or maybe you meant the 50,000 I lent Jason 3 years ago that he has never once mentioned repaying." Jason's face turned a deep angry red. "Dad, I was going to. Or maybe you meant the fact that I have been covering your mother's parents' property taxes for over a decade because they are land rich and cash poor and too proud to admit it." Linda made a small broken sound like a wounded animal. I sat back down and took another sip of water. "I have worked 37 years as a mechanic because I love the work, because I am good at it, because my customers trust me, and while I was doing that I built something none of you bothered to notice. I did it quietly, I did it carefully, and I did it to learn who you really were." Emily finally spoke. "Dad, we did not know. If we had known," I cut her off gently. "If you had known, then what? You would have treated me differently, you would have respected me, and that is exactly the problem, Emily. Your respect depended on my bank balance. Your love came with a price tag." I stood again, pulled my wallet from my pocket, took out $300 in cash, and placed it on the table. "That should cover my share of this lovely dinner, this intervention, this public humiliation." I looked at Linda and said calmly, "I will be staying at a hotel tonight. I suggest you use the time to decide whether you married a man or a meal ticket." I walked out of that restaurant, got into my old pickup, drove to a hotel near the airport, checked in, sat on the edge of the bed, and for the first time in years I felt light. The call started within an hour, Linda crying, saying she had no idea Emily planned to say those things, Emily saying she misunderstood and was only worried about me, Jason leaving a voicemail about how we needed to talk as a family. I did not answer any of them. The next morning I went to my lawyer. Her name was Margaret Chen, the daughter of the man who first taught me about real estate. She had taken over his practice years earlier. I told her I want to restructure everything, put the properties in a trust, protect the investment accounts, draft a post-nuptial agreement, and explain exactly what my wife is entitled to under state law. Margaret did not blink. How long have you been married? 42 years, and she has no idea about the assets. She knows about the shop and the house, that is all. Margaret leaned back and said, tell me everything. I spent 3 hours in that office. She took notes, asked questions, made calls. By the end she had a plan. The good news is most of your properties and investments were purchased through your business using separate accounts and were never commingled with marital assets. If you had used joint funds or titled things together we would have a problem, but you did not. So what does that mean? I asked. It means there is a strong argument that these are separate assets. Your wife may have a claim to appreciation during the marriage, but the base assets can likely be protected. What about the house? The marital home is always split, 50-50, no way around that, but that is $700,000 or $800,000 at most, so her portion would be $350,000 to $400,000. Something inside my chest finally loosened. And the kids? I asked. Margaret smiled. The kids are adults. They have no claim to anything unless you choose to give it to them. So what do? First we separate everything legally, create a trust for the properties with you as the sole beneficiary, move the investments into corporate structures, document everything, then we present your wife with a post-nuptial agreement. She can sign it or she can fight it. If she fights it will be expensive and ugly, but based on what you have told me, you have a very strong position. The key, she said, is that you kept everything separate, years of records, no family funds used, it was all from the business. I nodded once and said, do it, all of it. Over the next 3 months Margaret did exactly that. Properties transferred into trust, accounts restructured, entities created, every asset documented and protected. During that time I moved into one of my rental homes in New Westminster, quiet street, small yard, nothing flashy, just peace. The tenants had just moved out and I renovated the place myself, new kitchen, new bathroom, fresh paint. I took my time and actually enjoyed the work. Patricia called every day for the first month. I let everything go to voicemail. She moved through stages like clockwork. Anger first. How could I hide this from her? How could I lie for so many years? Then bargaining. If I just came home we could work through it. Therapy, counseling, a fresh start. Then sadness. She missed me. The house felt empty. She admitted she had made mistakes, but did not everyone deserve forgiveness? Sarah and Jason tried too. They came by the shop a few times. I was polite but distant, treated them the way I treated customers, professionally and without warmth. Jason tried to apologize, but it was the kind of apology that explained instead of owned anything. Dad, you have to understand, we thought you were struggling. I looked at him and said, so your solution was to announce to 40 people that I was a burden? He had nothing to say. Emily tried another angle. She brought Derek with her, probably thinking I would soften with a son-in-law present. Derek at least looked uncomfortable. Mr. Morrison, I want you to know I had nothing to do with what Emily said. I told her it was a bad idea. Emily shot him a look. But you did not stop her, I said. Derek opened his mouth then closed it. Here is what I learned about people, I said while running a diagnostic on an engine. They show you who they are in small moments. A dismissive comment, a rolled eye, an introduction that reduces you to something useful instead of someone loved. You pay attention to those moments and you are never surprised. I straightened up, wiped my hands on a rag and said I paid attention. After 3 months Margaret called me. Everything is in place, documents signed, filed and airtight. Now comes the hard part. We need to meet with Patricia and present the post-nuptial agreement. I asked what the terms were. Simple, she said. She acknowledges that the property's investments and business assets were acquired separately and remain yours. She gets the house. You buy out your half. She walks away with the full value, about $800,000. She also keeps her retirement accounts and pension. You keep everything else. If she refuses, then we litigate, but once her lawyer sees the documentation they will advise her to sign. Fighting would cost her hundreds of thousands and she would likely walk away with less. The meeting was set for a Thursday afternoon in Margaret's boardroom. Patricia arrived with her lawyer, a sharp, composed woman named Ms. Whitmore. Emily and Jason tried to come but Margaret stopped them at the door. this is between spouses not children. I sat across from Patricia. She looked smaller somehow, older, more gray in her hair than I remembered. When did that happen? Margaret laid everything out, documents, numbers, timelines. Ms. Whitmore reviewed everything carefully, asked questions, requested copies. After nearly an hour she leaned in and whispered to Patricia. Patricia's eyes filled with tears. "This is not fair," she said. "I was your wife for 42 years. And I was your husband for 42 years," I replied. "The husband you were embarrassed by, the burden you wanted removed." "That is not what Emily meant," she said. "You are twisting her words." "Am I?" 40 people heard those words, Patricia. 40 people watched you nod while our daughter humiliated me publicly. "I was trying to help you retire," she said. "No," I replied quietly. "You were trying to access money you believed you were entitled to, not because you earned it, not because we built it together, but because you tolerated being married to a mechanic for 4 decades. Ms. Whitmore cleared her throat. "Mr. Morrison, my client would like to negotiate, perhaps a larger settlement. The properties have appreciated significantly and surely Mrs. Morrison is entitled to some of that appreciation." Margaret smiled calmly. "The appreciation has already been accounted for in the house buyout. It is a generous offer considering every one of these assets was acquired through Mr. Morrison's separate business income, maintained in separate accounts and never commingled with marital assets." "The courts may see it differently," Ms. Whitmore said. "They might," Margaret replied. "Shall we find out?" "I have all day. My client has 6.7 million reasons to wait." "How much does yours have?" I asked. Ms. Whitmore's jaw tightened. She leaned in and whispered to Patricia again. Patricia looked at me across the table and said softly, "I never thought you were worthless, did you? Because that is exactly what I heard for the last 20 years. Every comment about Janet's husband and Carol's husband and the Thompsons with their place in Whistler, every wrinkle of your nose when you walked into my shop, every time you introduced me as just a mechanic, you never had to say the words, you showed me every single day. I loved you," I said. "You loved the idea of what I might become, you never loved who I actually was." The room went silent. Finally Patricia picked up the pen. Her hand was shaking but she signed the agreement. I bought her out of the house for $800,000. She moved into a condo in Kitsilano her parents helped her buy. We filed for legal separation. In a year it would become a divorce. That was 4 months ago. 2 weeks ago Emily called and left a voicemail. She was pregnant, due in 6 months. She wanted me to know, wanted to meet. I did not call back. Last week Jason showed up at the shop. His BMW was making a noise and he needed it fixed fast. He had an important meeting. I told him I was booked solid for the next month and handed him the card of another mechanic across town. He looked at me like I had slapped him. "Dad, come on, it is just a quick diagnosis. Mr. Chen across town is excellent," I said. "He will take good care of you." "Mr. Chen, you are seriously sending me to someone else? You told your client I was the guy who would fix it cheap." "Mr. Chen charges premium rates for premium service, seems more your speed." His face cycled through anger, hurt, realization and finally shame. "Dad, I am sorry," he said. I nodded. "I have heard you, but sorry does not mean we go back to how things were. Sorry means you understand what you did wrong. It does not entitle you to forgiveness." He left without another word. "Yesterday Margaret called and said you have a situation. Your wife and children want a joint meeting. They have hired a family counselor and want mediation." "For what purpose?" I asked. "Reconciliation. They want the baby to have a grandfather. They wrote a letter and want you to respond." She read it to me, asking for forgiveness, talking about family, about second chances, about how they would do anything to have me back. When she finished I was quiet for a long moment. "Tell them I will think about it," I said. "Will you?" she asked. "No, but they should sit with hope for a while, the way I sat with humiliation for 42 years. Margaret said my father used to say the best revenge is living well. He was a wise man," I said. "He also said everyone deserves a second chance but nobody deserves a third." She laughed softly and said, "That is the real question, isn't it?" I went back to work. There was a Honda Accord in Bay 2 that needed brake pads. The owner was a young woman saving for grad school. She apologized for not having much money, asked if she could pay half now and half later. I charged her for parts only, no labor. She nearly cried and hugged me right there in the shop, brake dust and all. That night I sat in my renovated apartment in New Westminster, cooked dinner, salmon, roasted vegetables, rice, poured a glass of decent whiskey, put on old jazz. My phone buzzed, a message from Patricia saying please give us a chance, I miss you. I looked at it for a long time, then placed the phone face down and took a sip. Sometimes the hardest thing is not forgiving the people who hurt you, it is forgiving yourself for letting it happen for so long. I am still working on that part, one day at a time, one brake pad at a time, one quiet decision to value myself the way I should have all along. If that makes me selfish, unforgiving, cold, so be it. I spent 42 years being what everyone else needed, maybe now it is time to figure out who I actually am. The shop opens at 8 tomorrow morning, I will be there at 7 like always, because I love the work, and that is finally enough.